short answer is I agree with almost all of President Trump's policy priorities, but I don't like some of his language and behavior. I think that's where most people are at, least most Republicans. Yes, ma'am.
Just follow up with his question. So, just mentioned you are kind of considered as an establishment, right, in the Republican Party. But Donald Trump is not, and he has a lot of supporters. How would you, I guess, can do to motivate the base, which is really not, traditional Republicans? And I think that would help get a chance to win.
Yeah, and I think, first of all, it's to labels that people put on, rather than putting the label on, just look at what I've done. So, again, when I was governor, conservative court for the first time in the modern history of Minnesota. Cut taxes overall during my time as governor. Held spending to the lowest rate of growth in 50 years. Work requirements in welfare for people who are able-bodied and able-minded. Signed concealed carry into law, and big Second Amendment supporter, signed concealed carry twice, only governor in the nation to do that. Had market-based, not government-based healthcare reforms. And outside groups like the very libertarian Cato Institute gave just a few governors in the entire country an A grade for being the opposite of establishment, and I was one of those governors. So I think if anybody who's fair-minded and fairly informed looked at my record of accomplishment, they would say I got more done on behalf of disruption and reform than any governor, at least from a conservative perspective, in the modern history of the state. So I'm proud of that record, and it's not an establishment record, it's a reform and conservative record. And again, compared to what? If that's compared to my opponent, he has been in office for 20 years and has accomplished almost nothing. So I'll put my record of accomplishment up against his any day. And so he talks about being a disruptor and all this stuff. He's disrupted nothing, led nothing, accomplished nothing. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, very good. First of all, thank you for coming, and really appreciate your spending time with us. Your references to all the affordable care and related bundle payment approaches really resonate with me.
You must be in healthcare if you know the term bundled payment.
So, building on the question that Chung Hui had earlier about alignment with Mr. Trump on the presidential level, what's your view on the escalating tariff that's going on between the two countries, China and the United States? Do you see that as the way to do really achieve the end goal of bringing fairness back to the trade business, or do you feel there's a better way of doing it? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think the president, I do applaud him for trying to get a better deal. And if he actually gets a better deal, then I think we'll all say that was a good outcome. But if he doesn't get a better deal, or it takes so long that in the meantime it causes all this collateral damage, for example, on Minnesota farmers, because they're the ones being subjected to some of the tariffs, that's a big concern and a big problem. So my hope is that the president can succeed in getting the better deal, and that we can avert what looks to be like an escalating trade war. But in order for that to work, he's got to get the deal done relatively soon. Now, he did put $12 billion of temporary relief into for farmers and some others who are being impacted by the tariffs, but that's not going to make them whole, and it's not going to last forever. So the clock is ticking. So this is one area where, even though I agree with him on tax policy, defense, and lots of other things, this is an area where it concerns me greatly. And I think he's got to either get the deal done soon, or we're going to have escalating problems on parts of our economy, particularly like our farmers in greater Minnesota. Yes?
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. And I really appreciated one of the key points you mentioned, education. It's so important to prepare for the future workforce. But without giving the same amount of money as Democrats I can tell you, most educators can testify small class size works as far as educating youngsters. But without giving the same amount of money as Democrats put into education, will the class size be increased, decreased, or stay the same as now? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it depends on what local school districts do with the money. And so you have to know that most of the money in the way schools operating money goes to people, because it's a people-intensive business, and that's understandable. But they get a certain amount of money from the state and their local taxpayers, and sometimes they enter into negotiations with their staff that exceeds the amount of money that's projected to come in. And if you've noticed, our schools in Minnesota are very often in financial crisis. Even now in times of recovery, with a governor who's a Democrat, we have many school districts who are in financial crisis. And one of the reasons they're in financial crisis is because they often enter into agreements that exceed their revenues. And that has to do a lot with how they negotiate with their employees. So class size is an important thing, and I think it's something that could be helpful. But if you look at the research around class size, you have to get it down to a certain level before it starts to make measurable difference. But it is an important thing, and I think we should ask our local school districts, as we give them more money, to reserve some of the money for controlling class size or containing or reducing class size, because that is most important, I think, or one of the top things for educators, one of the top things for parents. I'm getting criticized by one of my Democratic opponents in a TV ad right now on education, but if you go back and look at the Department of Education's data from the time I became governor, from the time I left governor, statewide, varies a little bit locally, the ratio of students to licensed faculty actually went down, not up. Yes, all right, Ivan.
I'm asking this question on behalf of my mom over there. So say hello.
All right.
Okay, so my question is, Governor Pawlenty, on YouTube, there are a bunch of ads criticizing your policies. For example, one ad stated that your policies made healthcare premiums skyrocket and led to multiple teacher layoffs. What are your responses to these criticisms, and how are you going to improve your image on social media platforms like YouTube?
Yes. Good question. Well, I think on the education one, we just covered that. On the health insurance one, the ad I think is inaccurate, and we can pull out some different data to show that. But one thing to keep in mind is I'm going to get criticized for having cut spending. I did. Not on everything, but many things. And so for those who don't like that, keep in mind in 2007, 2008, the global economy and the national economy crashed, and we had a near depression. A near depression. So people were losing their houses, losing their jobs, having their paychecks reduced, not increased. And my Democratic friends, what they wanted to do on the verge of a depression is go to the people and raise their taxes. And I said, I'm not going to do that. What I said is I expect government to tighten its belt, just like families are having to do it, just like individuals are having to do it, just like businesses are having to do it, and for the cities and the school districts and the others, including parts of government that say, no, we're not going to tighten our belts. We want to keep spending more, just like we always had, even though the rest of the economy has crashed globally and nationally. I thought was unfair. And I didn't feel comfortable in the middle of a near depression, going back to the people of Minnesota saying, you pay more, instead of saying, government, tighten your belts. I chose to tighten your belts. So if the accusation is, did I cut spending? Yeah, I did. That's what we wanted to. Yep.
So while you were in office, what were some things that you really enjoyed doing while you were working for Minnesota?
Well, every day if you're governor, if you like to learn, you get to learn. So you'll meet all day long with educators, scientists, school kids, students, homemakers, inventors, people who are visiting from foreign countries, people who have certain needs or concerns or ideas on suggestions. One day it might be data disaggregation, the next day it might be public transit. And so one of the more enjoyable parts of the job is every day was an enormous learning experience. And one of the other enjoyable parts of the job is I like people. And you get to be with people all day long and meet new people each day and every day. And they tell you interesting things that you can learn from. And it's fun. And then you get to try to do something good and meaningful. And I think if you can get up every day and learn new things, meet interesting people, and try to do good things, that's a good day. And so that's why one of the things we got. I guess we're gonna do one more. How about the gentleman with the T-shirt on there? The keys to happiness. Your name's over the second key. What is it? Happiness. Right.
We truly appreciate you for coming, Mr. Pawlenty. I have a question on cultural diversity. My name is Brian. I currently serve as the chair for the Asian American Network at Ameriprise. And my question is, I have to disclose this, because my question is not representative of my company, but that's on my behalf. So, there's only so much that we can do as individual contributors at companies to push for cultural diversity. When you run for office, what are some of the plans that you plan to advocate for cultural diversity from the top down?
Well, one of the things you could do is be aware of it. The second thing you can do is have a team that you have as commissioners, cabinet members, and others that reflect the faces and voices and perspectives of Minnesota today and tomorrow. Another thing you can do is make an effort to have affirmative outreach to diverse communities to make sure the lines of communication are open, friendships are established and maintained, and that takes interest and time and effort, and the governor can do that as well. But I want to make sure, though, that we don't drift back to what I said earlier, which is do what the Democrats do, which is identity politics, which is you're either this little group or that little group, and we have special rules and special things for each little group, and pretty soon, if everybody's their own little group, you don't have a country anymore, as the president says. And so we want to celebrate different cultures and backgrounds and make sure we are welcome and fair and open and outreaching to all communities. But I also don't want to set up an expectation that, you know, it's a quota system or each little group has their own separate rules and their own separate identities, because then we lose the common perspective that we need to be a state and a country.
Thank you, Tim.
All right. Yes.
Sorry, I know time really tight. We have one more question from 8th grader to B.
All right. Well, this will be our last one. Go ahead. 8th grader to B.
Hi, Governor Pawlenty. I'm here because...
Nice shirt, by the way.
I'm here because I have a concern, and I would like to hear your thoughts on that. So a while ago after school in the public library, I saw a couple 6th graders in the bathroom vaping. I know that's illegal because pretty sure you have to be 18 years of age to purchase and use to vape. And vaping is considered as tobacco products, so it's illegal to use in public places. So if you are elected governor again, what would you do to take actions against this type of problem?
Yeah, if I understood your question correctly, there were some people vaping in your 7th grade school, right?
In the public library's bathroom.
Public library's bathroom. So that's against current rules and laws, and so that's an enforcement issue. So we have rules on the books to address that already, and unfortunately it sounds like the library didn't have either the attention or the resources or the time or the ability to detect it and stop it. So I'm sorry that that happened, but there are already rules on the books to say that shouldn't happen. It's a matter of enforcing the rules better. All right, thank you for listening. Thank you for having me. Thank you for coming out and giving me part of your Saturday. I appreciate it very much.